Hi, my name is Carol Horn-Penn. I am the Vice President of Business Development for Clemens Construction, but more importantly for today, I am the President of Crew Philadelphia, well, Crew Greater Philadelphia. We made a name change last year. So welcome to our webinar today, How Philadelphia is Attracting Investment in Midst of a Pandemic. This idea for a webinar came about in October, when things were looking rather bleak. We didn't have a vaccine, we had no clue where we were going, and it just felt like, what's happening? There's all this wonderful investment still being made in Philadelphia, and we wanted to explore the idea of what is it that makes Philadelphia so attractive to large developers and organizations that are making critical investments in Philadelphia. So we have spent some time pulling together this wonderful panel to focus on resilience, talent, location, and why Philadelphia really is an economic engine for our city. I'm going to go to the next slide. I want to focus on sort of why, focus on how we do this. So Crew Philadelphia has a wonderful group of sponsors. You can see them all listed here. Our premier sponsors are Berkadia, Clemens Construction, Fidelity, Chicago Title, and Insurance Company, and Target Building Construction, and a host of other wonderful sponsors who without we would never be able to do the kind of programming we do. So I would like you to share your thoughts through the day, through the morning. Please provide input into the chat. Use social media as you can. And we look forward to the questions you will ask. Our panel is ready to address the questions that you might have. And then looking forward, Crew Greater Philadelphia will be hosting an event in February, which is related to a white paper that Crew Network has produced related to diversity and equity and inclusion in commercial real estate, really focusing on compensation and inclusion of women in the profession. So I hope you'll come to that one too. So without further ado, I want to turn the panel and the webinar over to Tom Dalfo. Tom is a Crew Philadelphia, Greater Philadelphia member. He is the Senior Vice President of Real Estate Services for the Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation. And I am certain that you will enjoy his leadership of this panel today, and we look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol. My name is Tom Dalfo, as Carol said, and it's my pleasure to be your host this morning. And I wanted to sort of set the stage with some remarks just to get people thinking about the moment that we're in and the topic that Carol outlined here. Robert Kennedy once said that there's an ancient saying that is both a blessing and a curse. May you live in interesting times. The past 10 months have certainly lived up to that. A worldwide pandemic, civil unrest born of longstanding injustice, a fraught election, a terrible Eagles season for people like me. But many businesses, institutions, and individuals are in undeniably dire straits. We've experienced a swift and seemingly unending lockdown, forced us to all make abrupt and largely unplanned transitions to shift to remote work and school and really most of our lives. And a special note to those who are managing all of this while also relearning middle school math or double tasking as a kindergarten teacher. I marvel at your ability to find time to attend an event like this one, and I value it and I appreciate it. It's truly remarkable. Remember when this was all going to just be for 2 weeks? Remember that back in March? It was going to be a 2-week lockdown. Yeah, 10 months later, it's kind of stretched out. I would ask people to raise your virtual hands if you had been in a Zoom happy hour before last March. I didn't know that that was a thing. I do now. We've become all too familiar with phrases like social distancing, essential worker, herd immunity. A face mask is now our can't live without accessory. We've learned that you really only need half of your wardrobe to present a professional image on screen. And for the record, I'm wearing jeans and not sweatpants, but for anyone who is, no judgment, that's okay. On a more serious note, far too many of us have experienced difficult losses of loved ones, of opportunities, and some of life's most important milestones. In my house, I have twins that are seniors in high school that are essentially not having their senior year. I mean, they're getting through it, but it's very different. And in almost every imaginable way, the rhythms and rituals of our lives have been upended, which is exactly the time you'd all expect an unprecedented investment and development boom, right? But yet that's exactly where we find ourselves in Philadelphia. For any of you who may be unfamiliar with PIDC, we're a public-private partnership that uses financing and real estate to drive growth to every corner of Philadelphia. As an organization, we have found the past 10 months very, very interesting. Last spring alone, we processed applications for financial assistance from Philadelphia businesses equivalent to 10 times our normal annual transaction model. We did that in about a 6 to 8 week span. Staggering. Yet, in 20 years I've been at PIDC, I've never seen such a broad and strong real estate investment and development market. So, Crew this morning has assembled a diverse panel, which we'll get to in a moment, of professionals to explore why, in the midst of the most challenging times in generations, important parts of the Philadelphia economy are growing and thriving. So please join me as I welcome our panelists. I'm going to allow them each to introduce themselves and then their organization. But before we do that, we jump back to that prior slide, just to help orient people a bit. This is where a lot of the activity is occurring. See the Navy Yard in the far south part of Philadelphia, the Hilco site, the former PES site and refinery in yellow, research centers in University City, and then the communities that surround it. We can go to the next slide, Kristen. So I'll jump to each of our panelists, and then we'll have a little bit of a discussion about the projects and some of the trends that we're seeing in the region driving this growth. So let me start with Leslie, if you can introduce yourself and a little bit of background on your company.
Sure. Good morning, and thank you, Tom, and thank you for everyone for joining us this morning. My name is Leslie Smallwood-Lewis. I'm one of the co-founders and principals of Mosaic Development Partners. For anyone who doesn't know us, we are a boutique, minority certified real estate development firm based in Strawberry Mansion, right in the city. And it's in one of the neighborhoods that we primarily focus. We've done work in Fair Hill, Strawberry Mansion, Wayne Junction, Germantown, all areas of North Philadelphia. Our primary goal has been to really focus on disenfranchised and marginalized neighborhoods. And in doing that, bringing new economics, but also respecting those who have lived there and actually suffered through the years of lack of investment in the neighborhoods. My partner and I have come up with the new term, gentrigation. There's been a lot of discussion about gentrification and where development actually comes in and pushes people out of the neighborhoods that they're most familiar with. But gentrigation is an intentional method of bringing in new economy, but yet integrating with those who have lived there. And they should benefit by the economics that come into the neighborhoods. One of the other ways that we have really tried to emphasize that and building community wealth and generational wealth in these neighborhoods is to also incorporate a equity mechanism called crowdfunding, where local people can now invest in all of our projects for as little as $500. And no, it's not a GoFundMe raise. It's a true equity investment into our projects. So we're really excited that we've implemented that, and there's an educational tool that also comes along with doing that. But I think most exciting, and I'll go into more detail later, is our opportunity to be a part of the new phase and the new the new phase of the Navy Yard. Liberty Property Trust did a fantastic job with PIDC and Centera to really get it off and get it going, but we are now taking it to the next 15-year phase. So I'm very excited about that, and I will talk more about that as we get further into the webinar.
Great, thank you, Leslie. Ed, if you could introduce yourself.
Sure, hi. Again, thanks everybody for attending this, and wonderful to be a part of this great panel. I'm Ed Klemick. I'm a partner at Kss Architects. We're about a little over 80 people now, with our largest office in Philadelphia. Not that I'm sitting there at the moment, unfortunately, but that's where most of the folks at KSS are located right now. We're architects of what we call learning, commerce, and community. And by that, we mean we serve markets that include higher education, include charter schools and K-12. In commerce, that we're looking at workplace and industrial development. In community, community placemaking, and other kinds of housing and support within communities. But probably most importantly is we find ourselves practicing at the intersection of those three things. And it's made for some very interesting work, a lot of exploration. We focus not only on design, but on research and how, what are the trends and what are the issues that we face at these intersections. And probably because we've been practicing at those intersections, we've been able to thrive. So we, as I mentioned, we're largest offices in Philadelphia. We also have offices in Princeton and in New York City. So again, thanks for inviting me here to share on this topic.
Great, thank you, Ed. Claire?
Good morning. Thanks, Tom and Carol and Kristen, for the invitation to participate this morning, and to all of you for joining in. And we do hope to have a conversation with you all and your questions. So I'm Claire Greenwood. I'm Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Philadelphia's CEO Council for Growth. For those of you who may not be familiar with our chamber, we are a large regional metropolitan chamber that represents about 600,000 employees across the greater Philadelphia region. I assume a similar footprint to the CREW Greater Philadelphia membership. Our CEO Council and the programs that I manage are really focused on how we continue to make this region a competitive place for business. And that includes not only our work to kind of continue to leverage the business community to improve the region, but also the work that we are doing through our Select Greater Philadelphia Council and other platforms to tell the story of our region's assets to attract companies, capital, and talent from outside of the market. We have very specific efforts focused on the life sciences and cell and gene therapy in particular, which I know we'll talk more about that opportunity today. And are really in the midst of additional research to focus similarly from an industrial manufacturing, and in particular in specialty chemicals that I think we can maybe touch on a bit. All of that obviously over the last number of months has been connected in as well with our recharge and recovery initiative that I can speak more to, but that is really being intentional in this 10-month period, but going forward to accelerate growth in our region as we see an opportunity to do so as the pandemic gets under control, but also to do that in a really hopefully different way than it has been in the past, and to do so in an equitable and inclusive way, and not just growth for growth's sake. So maybe some opportunities to connect that into the conversation as well.
Great, thank you, Claire. Some really important points. Brad?
Good morning. Thank you for having me this morning. I'm Brad Boone, Senior Vice President of Industrial Brokerage at Colliers International. I joined Colliers about a little bit over a month ago. Prior to that, myself and Brian McCurdy kind of led JLL's urban industrial practice here in Philadelphia, where we were fortunate enough to work with the PIDC team and a client of ours, Transwestern Development, to actually bring the first speculative development of industrial space in the city in over 40 years. So this topic is kind of near and dear to my heart and my practice. And prior to Brokerage, I actually worked with Tom Dalfo at PIDC, Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation. So we both, I think, have like minds in terms of seeing development in the city and seeing the industrial kind of sector grow and expand here.
Thanks, Brad. And for the record, Brad has sold more PIDC real estate since moving on than when he was at PIDC.
That is true.
It is true. And I'm glad. That's really put that in park. And finally, Justin, if you can introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me as part of this panel. My name is Justin Dunn, Senior Vice President of Hilco Redevelopment Partners. I was recently brought on in October to focus on the development of the former PES refinery. I previously held the position as Senior Director on a similar project with Hilco in Baltimore, known as Trade Point Atlantic, where we redeveloped a former steel mill consisting of 3,100 acres into a multimodal logistics hub. Our goal is to replicate that success here in Philadelphia with the former refinery.
Great. Thank you, Justin. And Justin, since you're the newest member of the Philadelphia real estate market, we'll haze you, and I'll ask you to sort of go first and talk about a little bit more about Hilco to the extent you want, and then kind of an overview of the plans for the former refinery site and and in some sense, kind of the value proposition, like what attracted you guys to come and acquire this property? Presumably you have resources that can go lots of places, and you made I think a not insignificant bet on this site. So have that.
Thanks, Tom. Look forward to speaking about it.
Can you go ahead? You want to go?
Sorry, I didn't know you wanted me to go now.
No.
All right. Well, first, let me give a little bit of background on Hilco, obviously. So we specialize in acquiring and redeveloping complex industrial real estate in core markets throughout the country. We have a proven track record of successfully executing on the most challenging sites, from demolition, environmental remediation to vertical development projects. We take pride in being trusted partners with our largest stakeholders, which are the communities where our projects reside. We're extremely focused on long-term sustainability, including jobs, local economic growth, and of course the environment. We couldn't be more excited to be part of the Philadelphia community. Each day we learn more and more about our neighbors just simply by engaging. For example, through our Hilco Helps initiative, we partnered with the Salvation Army of Greater Philadelphia over the holidays and donated over 1,000 winter coats to those in need. The plans for the former refinery, are really simple, right? Take a distressed site with hundreds of storage tanks, thousands of miles of pipeline, dated infrastructure, and mostly useless buildings for today's day and age. Decommission, remediate, and demolish them in a safe manner, and then transform it into a sustainable economic engine for the region, providing thousands of jobs and millions in tax revenue, and do it in a significantly more environmentally responsible manner than the previous use. We anticipate over 3 miles of new infrastructure, including roads, water, sanitary, and storm drain, which will service roughly 13 million square feet of new building product over the next 10 years. Obviously, this is a huge undertaking, and it will take a tremendous amount of effort from our team. We're currently in the infancy of this project life cycle. We are underway with demolition and simultaneously refining the master plan for the site. Although the market will drive what our ultimate build out will look like, we do anticipate a mix of e-commerce and distribution centers, maybe some light manufacturing, rail served buildings, and likely some cold storage facilities based on current trends. We also acknowledge that Philadelphia is a leader in the research and development industry, and we anticipate supporting those efforts in some way as well, especially with the proximity of the Navy Yard, who has established a phenomenal life science campus. I'd speculate that some storage space or some cold storage, deep cold storage maybe, would be beneficial for those tenants making breakthroughs in this industry. Why Philly? The people. Realistically, they love this city, and we quickly understood why. This city offers everything from rich history, representing our freedom, to the unmatched pride that's recognized nationwide. And shout out to the Eagles fans being from Baltimore here. That sense of pride helps solidify our confidence in the local leadership and the local workforce, which is so critical to this site's successful transformation. I can't stress that enough. Obviously, the location with the amount of buildable area is unmatched, and location to the airport, the highway network. But that location is only as good as the people it serves. It really, really is. Our site will contain a variety of different types of employment opportunities with different skill sets, That said, almost overnight, our country's logistics workforce became the backbone. I know from personal experience, my reliance on e-commerce and deliveries probably tripled over the last year. It felt like every day there was just a stack of boxes outside my front door. And hopefully that'll settle down soon. But of course, the course has been set, and these unfortunate times have only accelerated the path the industry was already on. So with that, we're truly grateful for all the support we've received from Philadelphia. It's a citywide effort to make this exciting project successful, and we really look forward to continuing that partnership over the long run here.
Great, thank you, Justin. Just a couple of one quick question. What's your sense, to the extent you have a handle on it now, what the total level of investment sort of start to finish, and you're looking at a 10 to 15 year time frame, so I know that's a little bit.
Yeah, it's multiple billions of dollars we anticipate in total investment. We do have about a 10-year time frame is our goal. So obviously, those are market drivers that will dictate that, but that is our goal.
Good. Any surprises since you guys have acquired the property?
Not in the 3 months that I've been there so far, Tom. Knock on wood. No, so far, I mean, we've been hitting our goals. We're continuing to learn more and more about the site and about Philadelphia, and again, just really excited.
That's great. I appreciate it. Welcome to the market. We look forward to really great things happening on the property. And I would note that prior to Hilco's acquisition of the refinery, I had a hand in the largest real estate acquisition in Philadelphia's history since William Penn, but you guys have topped it. I'm part of the team that helped acquire the Navy Yard, and that's probably a good segue from Justin and Hilco and the refinery just down the river a little bit to the Navy Yard and to Leslie. And so Leslie, if you could expand a little bit on kind of what your vision and your partners at Ensemble have along with my colleagues at the Navy Yard.
Leslie, you're muted.
Leslie, you might be on mute. Yeah.
I apologize. Thank you so much, folks. First of all, I just want to say that I'm so excited to be a part of a partnership with PIDC and Ensemble. Thus far, over the last several months, as we've negotiated our development agreement, and Mosaic has just become, fully acquainted with Ensemble. It's been so far a most rewarding experience. And I will say that fortunately, Ensemble is very well versed at the Navy Yard. They were actually very visionary many years ago when they developed the Marriott Hotel that's currently there. And then since then, once Liberty Property Trust decided to really move out of the industry, they acquired several of their buildings down at the Navy Yard. So that really puts them as the largest private property owner in the corporate center area of the Navy Yard. They own about 1.3 million square feet of space there. So Mosaic, we're walking into a relationship with a group that is very familiar, very knowledgeable, and very committed to the Navy Yard. So, and for Mosaic, I think we are bringing a very inclusive approach to the development, and Ensemble is fully on board, and PIDC has set the tone that that's exactly what they want for the Navy Yard. We're creating a whole new ecosystem. For those who are not aware, historically, there has never been any residential development down at the Navy Yard. It's always been job creation, and that's still the primary goal for the Navy Yard. But recently, the Navy lifted the deed restriction down at the Navy Yard, allowing us to now proceed with real estate, residential real estate development. So it is our intention to actually create a new ecosystem, a new neighborhood. So the project consists of 109 acres. It's broken into 3 areas in the Navy Yard. One is called the Historic Core, which will really serve as the downtown area of the Navy Yard. Then there's Mustin North and Mustin South. And Mustin North has been primarily designated for life sciences research buildings. And then Mustin South is really the belle of the ball because it's got waterfront access. So we're looking at about a 15-year horizon for this project. And I know as Tom asked Justin to kind of project the size of the project, we're projecting it's going to be about $2.6 billion over that 15-year time period. We're proposing about 2.5 million square feet of life science, manufacturing, and office space to continue the successes that have already been created in the Navy Yard in the life science arena. There's WUSI and Iovance and Adaptimmune that are currently there. So we want to create this life science manufacturing hub. And we think we have the real strength because of the location, because of our ability to really provide what some of these companies can't find in the urban areas. There's a wonderful cluster, as we all know, in University City, being so close to the talent and to the research institutions like University of Penn and CHOP and the Science Center. They have created a wonderful cluster, but oftentimes these manufacturing companies can't get the square footage or the floor plate that they need, and they often go out to the suburbs to seek it. But fortunately, we have about 10 available building sites that can accommodate up to about 1.5 million square feet of space. And being able to construct these 1 to 3 story buildings with 22 feet ceiling heights and large footprints, and provide this kind of build to suit approach to building. So we think that that's going to be very competitive and desirable to cell and gene therapy and other life science research companies. In addition to continuing the life science hub down at the Navy Yard, we're also proposing about 2,800 new residential units. And what we think is going to be very desirable is this whole kind of urban suburban hybrid offering that we'll be able to provide. There's so much wonderful public open space. And as we go through this pandemic, we have really coveted now our decks and our backyards, and being able to walk to a nearby park to just be able to just get out and breathe and feel safe. So one of the things that I've noticed now that I've become so familiar with the Navy Yard is that the open spaces that are available there are just absolutely fantastic. And we've got some really great ideas of what we'd like to achieve with activating those spaces and just making them a feature piece of this new neighborhood that we are creating. In addition to the open space and also waterfront access, we're proposing about 350,000 square feet of supportive retail and maker space. One of the things that we are highly committed to is, as I said, inclusiveness and diversity. So in these spaces, we're going to make sure that there are sizes that are achievable for small businesses, that we are creating programs to help provide some subsidies to help ramp up Black and brown businesses, women-owned businesses, to be a part of this ecosystem that we're creating at the Navy Yard. So we've got great plans. I think you all should be familiar that we just issued an RFP for the master plan. We did a concept plan as we responded to the RFP, but this particular master plan will be an update to the last one that was done in 2013. It will incorporate what The Ensemble Mosaic team is proposing on our 109 acres, but it will also include what PIDC wants and needs to do on some of the parcels that they will retain ownership. The entryway and making it a bit more inviting and gracious. So some of those things will also be incorporated in the master plan as well. So again, we are excited, and for us, and I think also for Ensemble, you don't have an opportunity like this often where you have a blank slate and you can be the artist and really create something that is going to be extremely special, something that I think that the city can be very proud of, and create a whole new, diverse, inclusive neighborhood. Which I think is going to be very important to be responsive to all of the things that we have really been faced with over these last several months, that you really recognize the inequities, the need for social justice and righting of wrongs. There's so much work to be done. And I know for myself and my partner, we're very excited that we have this opportunity to really pave the way to what we think can be a model for development going forward in the city.
Thank you, Leslie. I think that's a great sort of summary of kind of what the opportunity is and the vision that you and your partners have put together. And I want to sort of give some credit to my colleagues at the Navy Yard, both present and in the past, who made some really strategic decisions, ranging from John Grady when he headed up that to Prima Gupta to Kate McNamara, who heads it now. And there was some really, I think, sound and thoughtful decisions about commitment to open space. And we did that. We didn't do that in a vacuum. We did that with feedback and hand in hand with our development partner at the time, the folks at Liberty and Centerra. But I think we're seeing those benefits, that if you take some real estate and set it aside for, quote, non-productive uses, it's not going to generate revenue. But if it's done well, it really sort of propels the property and the vision going forward. And we've seen during the pandemic that the Navy Yard has been a place where people in South Philadelphia and maybe in Southwest kind of view it as a place where they can go and get some breathing room. You can go there, you can see some interesting architecture. We had movie nights. We had a sea monster coming out of one of the buildings 2 years ago. We had all kinds of really interesting art installations that I think do create a sense of a destination. And we're really happy that people are starting to not view it as it's that place at the end of Broad Street you have to go through a gate to get to. It's becoming more and more part of Philadelphia. So I'm glad that you guys have the confidence in the site, and we look forward to where it can go in years to come. And I think the focus on life sciences that's been demonstrated at the Yard in a different format than what you find in New York City is interesting, and I think a good segue to our next panelist, Claire Greenwood. So Claire, if you could step us through a little bit at an overview of sort of advanced life sciences, biotech, cell and gene therapy, things that people like me throw around as if they're all the same. I know they're not, but if you could step us through that and where that's headed, it would be great.
Thanks, Tom. You maybe you're putting too much confidence in my ability to explain the science, but I appreciate the suggestion. So, I mean, I think the opportunity here is just to sort of restate what we've already started to hear, right? We can see as a community that there is momentum that is resulting in the sort of commercial market from the incredible science that our academic institutions have been investing in for the last 20 or so years. In the case of cell and gene therapy specifically, maybe my layman's attempt is it is a sort of a category of new therapeutics, so a way of delivering a therapy to a patient. One is leveraging human cells, and one is leveraging a viral vector to deliver a corrected gene. So much of that science is really founded and was pioneered by scientists at Penn and CHOP and other institutions in our region. And as I said, we've made this sort of 20-year investment in the science itself, which now over the last 5 give or take years, we're really starting to see incredible commercial success. So I just have 2 slides here, which we put together as an infographic. This is available on the CO Council's site. It's downloadable, anybody can use it. It's not branded. But in case folks don't know, the first FDA-approved cell therapy is based on Penn technology. The first approved gene therapy came from Philadelphia as well. It's Luxturna, commercialized by Spark Therapeutics, which, as we know, is a pretty enormous commercial success for our region. We are, I would say, if not first, in the top 3 in NIH grants in cell and gene therapy subsectors. So if you think about the public resource as an input into what we now see as the commercial success and really the real estate development that has followed, this is still a really critical piece of the puzzle that we feed that pipeline continued. One note I'll add in the context of today, the messenger RNA technology that we're hearing so much about in the context of COVID vaccines also is Penn-based technology. There's a Penn researcher who really is the pioneer of that science. And I think I heard somebody the other day reference the potential of $1 trillion industry just based on the mRNA technology. So that's another therapeutic delivery channel or mechanism that I think our region has clearly some basis and advantage in that we're going to see sort of the follow-on advancing of the science and then commercial activity as a result. Already, we have more than 30 development companies in the cell and gene therapy space that are making Greater Philadelphia our home. We obviously know, and you can advance to the next slide, we've got huge assets in the sort of academic and medical institutions in our region. There's a lot of development in this space and space available to these companies already, but we know there is more needed, and we're already hearing about projects this morning which we see as opportunity, and really the markets are responding to this need. All of this momentum, I think, is catching attention not only of those of us in the market, but sort of third-party validators. So for example, in JLL's 2020 Life Sciences Real Estate Outlook, our region moved up from number 8 as a life sciences hub to number 6. Again, that's all life sciences, and you really peel that down to the subsectors around cell and gene therapy, and I think much of the data suggests we're in the top 3 markets. I believe it was Hickey and Associates named us one of 2020's top 25 global innovation hubs because of so much of the innovation activity across the community, but in particular in biotech, medical science, and pharma. So we can tell this story ourselves, and we've got proof points to back it up, but it's useful to get that validation from outside, sort of more neutral third-party validators, as I said. There's already more than 5,600 individuals who are graduating from our region's institutions in relevant disciplines. We did an analysis last year that suggested the potential growth of over, I believe, 120% from a workforce needs in this subsector. And so we know that the momentum is pointing in the right direction. And maybe to the point of this morning's conversation a little bit, investment activity in companies in this space did not slow down in 2020 despite the conditions around us. There were 49 deals in the life sciences space in our region, valued at more than $12 billion. And 6 of those were in the cell and gene therapy space. And that accounted for $4.5 billion of that 12. So the money and resources flowing to these organizations. We've seen a number of IPOs just in the last number of months, Passage, Bio, Imvax, Amicus. Over the last year, we saw a company just outside or in its sort of adjacent research and development organization, Adorcia, select Wayne as their US headquarters, a Swiss, I believe, Swiss-based company. So there's no shortage of activity and sort of proof points for our opportunity here. You can probably take those slides down, but at least just gives you a flavor of how we're sort of, showing a picture of all of our advantages in this space. But we're continuing to leverage all of that, as I mentioned, through a number of channels in order to make sure that that story is being told outside of Greater Philadelphia. So we have efforts underway around paid social out of market directly to talent in this space in the life sciences and cell and gene therapy industry. We have paid social also directed at a specific group of companies, about 250 companies in the life sciences space in the US and Europe, to tell our region's story and really to generate proactive leads in this sector, because we know we really have significant advantages. And then we're also, through our Select Greater Philadelphia platform, already responding to projects in this sector who are really reaching out and saying, we're hearing this is an opportunity for looking at Greater Philadelphia. And I would say probably in the last 6 months alone, we're probably inching up to 10 unique conversations and projects in that space as well. So Tom, I think that probably provides a little bit of background. The only thing I'll note, in our recharge and recovery effort, we had 160 individuals from across the community engage with us in partnership with the City of Philadelphia and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, a real public-private partnership, to say what are the kinds of things our community can be doing to accelerate growth, and even to build on Leslie's comments earlier, to really be intentional about accelerating growth in an equitable and inclusive way. And as I said before, not just growth for growth's sake, because that will, I think, exacerbate the challenges that we've seen in our community over the last decades. But also the clarion call there was, historically, Greater Philadelphia has not recovered as well compared to other major metropolitan areas. We've had much slower recoveries, and there was a lot of urgency around that being sort of an intolerable result given the environment we're in today. And we were really pleased to see that this group of very diverse group of folks really doubled down on the aspiration of our region being a hub of cell and gene therapy. So these were not necessarily only folks in the industry. There were individuals from across our community, different sectors represented, and said, yeah, that we are all seeing this as a real opportunity for our community. And we are being intentional now about also connecting that into a proactive workforce and talent strategy, so that we're not only attracting individuals from outside of the market, but we are purposefully planning in collaboration with folks in the industry opportunities to ensure underrepresented individuals from our community have a clear pathway into roles in this sector. So it really feels like it's really good momentum and starting to hang together. And Tom, I know there's other opportunities than the projects we're talking about today, for sure, some of which PIDC is, and you personally are driving, but hopefully that provides some good context of why we think we have real advantages here.
No, Claire, I think it's fantastic. It's the level of momentum in this sector. I was describing to somebody, I said, it's like when you light a rocket and it's going to take off, and it really is. And I think that's sometimes a little bit hard for people in this region to sort of wrap their head around, right? That happens in Silicon Valley, that happens in other places. But I think you touched on it. So we've had the talent. So the earliest discoveries that sort of kind of create the industry and the the mechanisms to do more were invented at labs at Penn and CHOP and some related facilities like Wistar and some of the other institutions where we have a ton of strength.
Yeah.
And that's not, we're not a one-horse town that way. And I think that's important to be able to sort of attract talent and support one another. But the fact that that has then led to the importing of a ridiculous amount of resources, and I think the money changes things. And then the point you made about the number of graduates coming from life sciences. So as part of the effort when Philadelphia competed for Amazon, like 500 other cities, one of the feedback pieces that we got why we weren't selected, and who knows how accurate it is, but it was a piece of feedback, was that we didn't have the tech talent needed to support a company like that. This would say, if you are in this space, pardon me, you want to be here. We have a lot of bodies and we're going to have more of them every year. And you can build, you don't have to worry about tapping out a pipeline. And we're seeing companies come here. And I think the really interesting thing from my perspective is that not only are resources coming and companies getting purchased or getting venture capital backing, instead of other sectors where somebody would get resources and the new financial stewards of the company would say, you need to go someplace else and grow your company. They're saying stay right there. Or they're giving you money and saying you need to come to Philadelphia. And it feels very different this time. So I think it's really remarkable. And I think it's a good segue. So Brad, if you can sort of put all this into context about how logistics and mixed use and the growth in the cell and gene therapy fit in the market, that would be great.
That's a lot. It's how to get it. So before and it's a broad area, but I want to go back a little bit in time to 2016, I guess, when I moved into the brokerage space. At that time, I was at PIDC and responsible for attracting logistics and manufacturing and industrial companies to the city of Philadelphia. And what we kept running against was the lack of product, right? There's no product, and no one wants to wait. In this environment, no company's really waiting unless they need a very specialized facility for a building, right? So zero product, zero buildings had been built in the city of Philadelphia on spec in 40 years. So that was the environment just in 2016. So I had a bright idea that I could change that, or that I can help affect some change in the space. So I partnered with my colleague who was at JLL at the time, having the same problem, right? He had clients, large retailers, last mile users that wanted to be in Philadelphia, and he had to take them to either New Jersey or to Lehigh Valley. So we decided to partner and at JLL and create this urban logistics practice. And work with PIDC to convince Tom that he should sell some of his real estate to developers for speculative projects. Obviously, Tom had already bought into the idea, so it wasn't a hard push, but the real push was really convincing investors and developers to really think about Philadelphia for speculative development. And the pushback was there were no comps. And investors always need comps. So you have 40 years of no development, of course you have no comps. So we did convince a few, before we were able to convince some of the investors, we definitely got laughed out of a lot of rooms. We got laughed out of our own holiday party that year, trying to sell people on investing in Philadelphia. But fast forward to 2021, and it's a sea change, right? It's a new paradigm, totally different location in terms of interest in development. Every national developer that exists wants to be in Philadelphia. You can't find land. You can't find Class C buildings to redevelop into Class A product. So that's where we are, right? So in terms of some stats, between 2020, last couple of years, you've seen like double-digit rental growth every year for the past 3 years. You've seen vacancy rates drop by 1.5% to 2% every year, each year from 2016 forward. You've seen in 2019, you had 440,000 square feet of projects deliver. 2020, that increased to 565. This year, we're going to have 1.7 million square feet of deliveries of space. And 2022 and going forward, you have 2.5 million to 3 million square feet of space delivering. And mind you, I'm including the Hilco project in that. So, so 2.5 million to 3 million square feet of space delivering probably for the next 10 years. So coming from zero space delivering in 20 to 40 years prior to 2019, that is a paradigm change. And what I would say is, up until today, I would say that the primary tenants or uses for these buildings has been last mile. But naysayers will say, there's a limited number of last mile users that need to be in the city of Philadelphia. But I would say they're looking backwards. They're making that assumption on what is and what has been, for the past 40 years. I would say with the Hilco project and with another project to the north of the city, this region is fastly becoming, this region being the 95 corridor, Lower Bucks County, Philadelphia, and I would say upper or Delaware County. We're definitely I would say we're becoming a location or a region for regional facilities or national serving facilities. And I think Hilco's investment will prove that out. I think it'll be a massive success. I think that location, along with the project to the north of the city, will see tenants that have not been in the market, that have looked everywhere but Philadelphia because there wasn't product, right? You can't really say that this is not a market for regional or national facilities when there hasn't been the land available for it. You can't really make that assumption. And I think the future will prove out the thesis. And I think all of this is driven by the city's fundamentals, right? The labor, the density, and the transportation infrastructure. I mean, these are things that you just can't replicate anywhere else. You can't replicate that in the middle of a rural area. You can't, where if you put 2 Amazon facilities, you will have zapped up all the available labor talent. You don't have the infrastructure really. Some of these locations are having to turn down facilities because they just don't have the utility infrastructure to handle new facilities. And so that really plays out well for Philadelphia, which I think we at this point, I would say we have unlimited capacity. And so I think that will draw unlimited capacity from the transportation infrastructure, but unlimited capacity from a labor standpoint as well. So I think that will absolutely prove to be a positive and a winning kind of formula for investors like Hilco and the other investors investing in the Philadelphia market. In terms of outside of just the logistics sector, and I would say obviously the items that the previous speakers talked about in terms of the talent around our specialized life science sector, the education institutions, obviously is going to continue to be a serious factor or competitive advantage for the city. I think as we think about these the development of these logistics facilities, or I shouldn't even say logistics facilities, I should say industrial facilities, they definitely will have some manufacturing. There definitely will be manufacturing uses, but it is when you sit in my seat, it's hard to predict exactly what those square footage numbers will be in terms of these specialized facilities. But we know the demand is there. As I am out there leasing space, I'm definitely seeing interest from life science users every day. I think as these facilities get built closer to the center or to the kind of the transportation and population centers of the city, to the south of Center City, to the west of Center City, I think you'll see a lot more interest and a lot more of these transactions happening. Where the activity has been prior to the last year, it's been far northeast Philadelphia, which I can tell you is not really, where a lot of the kind of the life science focused buildings want to be. They want to be closer to the population, closer to the institutions, the education institutions, closer to the hospitals, closer to, to center city. So I think as development takes place in the southwest part of the city along the Schuylkill River and at obviously the Hilco facility, you'll definitely see the life science sector kind of show up in those locations. I think that's where you'll see it. I highly doubt you'll see the majority of the life science sector towards the northeast, but you may see some of it. But most of it will be driven towards, I think, the southwest, near the existing assets, being the educational institutions and the hospitals and the population center. I am on.
You're muted.
Okay, you're muted.
Yeah. Thank you, Brad. That's a great overview of the market, and it does feel different than prior years. And Brad noted it took a little convincing for me to agree to support a speculative development project, because I've been hearing people promise they're going to build a project speculatively for years, and then when we get down to brass tacks, they say, no, not really. I really need a tenant. And so it was a way to tie up property. Before I jump over to Ed to talk through kind of what this means from a design and facility and sort of planning perspective, I would note for folks, if you have any questions for the panelists or for me, but probably more for the panelists, please use the chat function, and we'll try to include and get to whatever questions people have. We want to hear from the audience members and try to make sure that we're addressing your needs. So with that, Ed, so with these, based on these presentations and Brad's overview of demand, what are we going to build?
All right, so and Tom, I can't help myself. I'm an architect. I have to talk in pictures.
Okay.
So please forgive me. I'm going to ask you if you don't mind bringing up that first slide.
There you go.
So what are we going to build, and what's going to happen here? That's going to happen around things that we're beginning to do already. And the past year for us has been an incredible year. We've actually grown as a company because there's so much change out there that is going on in the world that we were looking ahead to. And I think this stage had already been set. We've been talking about COVID in terms of really being an accelerator of the change that was already happening. And one of the areas of change that was happening concerned industry and what's going on in industry. And I think for a long time, we didn't really think about industry here in the US. Industry was the, you got stuff from a distribution center that you went to a store from to acquire. And that distribution center was kind of far away someplace where you never had a chance to really see it. Not a lot of folks worked there. It just had a lot of stuff in it. Well, that's been rapidly changing. And what I'm showing you here is work that we are doing now that we've turned into diagrams. The thing that really changed pretty quickly, and what you'll see in the top of this diagram, is what we began to realize is that first it began with distribution, but it's moving into other industry. It's the idea that it is not simply a place for goods. In fact, right now, I'll tell you that it's being designed around a workplace rather than a storage place for goods. We're even doing a research project around how you bring well practices and well design into the industrial workplace, because so many people work there. It's not unusual for 3,000 people to work here. And when that begins to happen, a lot of different things begin to happen. We're beginning to see that it's really integrating other kinds of uses into this development is what's making them really valuable. So for example, early on, we looked at retail as being a part of it. And if we think about when we go to IKEA, it's pretty much a distribution center with a retail front to it, right? That's beginning to happen now at all different kinds of scale. The reintegration of light manufacturing, increasingly as people want more customized goods, and as we're working to integrate that within the e-commerce platform, manufacturing is beginning to return. And this may be particular to particular regions, but right now content, think about Amazon, as much about content as it is about the delivery of things. Some of the content they're looking to control or to deal with is production, television, film. So we've actually been incorporating studio spaces into what had otherwise been distribution centers. And you do all that in the creative workforce that drives it is a lot bigger than it ever was before. So the percentage of office and the nature of those office spaces dramatically changes. Education spaces have always been a part of this. We've been making a lot of tech schools as part of distribution and industry centers directly because they need to recruit, and the best way to recruit is through education. I'll add the parking component that you see here is pretty interesting too, because the other radical change that's been happening in industry is the transportation infrastructure that's servicing it. For a long time, we designed everything around the 53-foot trailer. That is not the mark of a Class A industrial development anymore. Rather, it is how you deal with the smaller vehicles that allows it to be integrated into the urban context. So we're designing large parking garages for the kinds of fleet you probably see outside your window right now. They're not trailers, tractor trailers rolling down your street. These are a lot smaller vehicles, and they're fleets that are actually owned by companies as well. And the other thing about it is, as I mentioned, this is all driven by labor. People work here. So the integration of housing and whatnot into that has been a part of it. And along with that, the large open spaces that we need to support all this and still meet things like stormwater requirements and whatnot, has created some really unique opportunities. So the kinds of projects that we're working on, I like to think of as ecosystems. And I think Leslie also talked about that, the nature of the ecosystem. So some of the things working on what we'll call the creative ecosystem. So this is a place where we have distribution, we do have light manufacturing, we have studios. Here's a very interesting thing: the correlation between studio space and how you use production is a lot like distribution in terms of the goods you need to bring in, the clear spans that you need, the heights that you need, all of that really works well. And the creative office space that's right there makes it all work the better. The garage space that I talked about accommodates not only the vehicles that we talked about in terms of distribution, but here's an interesting thing: creative studios also come with event space because they want to bring people into it as well. So all of a sudden we're beginning to have what is an industrial-based development fostering a much more integrated kind of a thing. So whether they're what I'll call the innovation ecosystem that deals with how we produce things more rapidly, or creative ecosystem where we produce things that, whether they're content or things that respond to a market that is much more dynamic. These are the kinds of ecosystems that we're doing. But what we're doing right now, we're doing it vertically. So these are individual one-off projects, and we're doing a few of them. But what's really interesting about Philadelphia and its opportunity is that we now have the opportunity to do this horizontally and at scale. So if you go to the next slide. So this is where you started. And these are the opportunities that we've talked about. Research that already exists here, the Hilco site, the Navy Yard, and the neighborhoods that surround it. But what's in more than opportunities are possibilities. And if you'd hit play. So while I've talked about the idea of integration, what's really become important is actually the idea of convergence. And I would suggest that development that's going to happen in the future is, as much as it's about integration, it's about convergence. Convergence happens in a way that's a lot different. And that's what's interesting about Philadelphia, and why I think people can come here, is because of this as a possibility. In places of, it's the area of the white that we really need to pay attention to, not just the areas of the color. We have to avoid the idea of districting and really take advantage of the idea of integration. So and the convergence of these. So what happens in places of convergence? And Claire talked about this in terms of the life sciences. There is a lot of focus right now in the life sciences about the idea of convergence of the the life sciences industrial cycle. Or what's beginning to happen is the recognition that we need to bring these things together a lot more tightly. And why? Well, it's right in front of you. It's COVID. And we all hope this is the last pandemic that we're going to face, but this is not the last crisis like this that we're going to face. In the environment that's happening, these things are going to happen more quickly. And you can have mature therapeutics living in kind of a global context. It doesn't work to get products out that need to be more innovative, that need to address immediate crises. That's going to happen in a convergent context where research, piloting, manufacturing, distribution all happen in a very tight cycle. So it works perfectly for the life sciences. and why it's important, and Philadelphia can be unique in delivering it. There's another, I think, important thing about areas of convergence, and this goes to a little bit around what Leslie was beginning to say, and that is and I have to make a bit of a confession here, I'm not just an architect, I'm also a student. I recently decided to go back to school. I'm getting another degree. I'm getting a degree in global development and social justice, and we're focusing on these areas of convergence because inclusion is not enough. What really needs to happen is engagement. And engagement is exactly the kinds of things that happen in the areas of convergence. It's at that point that we're also dealing with communities that are not everybody can be included, but in places of convergent, they can be, where the value of neighborhood, the value of research centers, the value of the jobs that they can bring converge together. And what begins to happen in that synergy is something dramatic in terms of the innovation that we create in terms of life sciences, but also dramatic in terms of the equity that we can create in terms of the neighborhoods that are around. So the real opportunities and places of convergence. We have the possibilities of these as separate districts, but we have, more importantly, the opportunity to bring them together and to converge them, and uniquely in Philadelphia, horizontally, in a way that they can work even better. And it's because what we're seeing is our work in terms of integration laid the groundwork for that. We're really excited about the possibility of making it happen in a convergent setting. So that's the kind of development that we're engaged with today, and we hope and are pretty sure is going to happen here.
Ed, thank you. That's fascinating. I think some of my colleagues at PIDC were used to dealing with really thorny and complicated projects, and this feels like that sort of on steroids. But I agree with you. It's usually worth the effort. So I always describe our projects: is it worth the brain damage? And usually they are. This one's going to be challenging to integrate districts that way, but I you sold me that the idea of, I would tell folks, if we can you use 2 and 2 and get 6 instead of 2 and 2 and get 4, and it sounds like it might be worth the effort for us to do this. We're getting some questions in from the audience, and so I want to get to those to give people a sense of it. So I'll summarize the first one here. It's directed for Brad, but it probably other folks may want to weigh in kind of briefly so we can get to a few. It's a recognition of important transportation assets and infrastructure assets in Philadelphia, but a recognition that there's a real serious lack of resources to improve and maintain them. Is there any sense of a strategy or an approach how to engage the state and federal officials so that we can get resources for that? And like I said, it's directed to Brad, but we'll start there, and then if anybody else wants to weigh in, that'd be great.
That's a hard one. I do not. I mean, outside. I mean, in terms of from the investor side, investor developer side, I am at a loss on how that community would really approach this question or that challenge outside of traditional lobbying. But I think most of the pressure and influence from that standpoint would come from local elected officials, local politicians. I don't really know that there's a push or there's a lever for the private sector to really go out and do that. I don't know that there's the stomach for it, or the interest on the smaller scale investors do that. I think large scale investors like a Hilco or someone investing projects of that scale, I could see how there would be, and that are going to be in the community, become a part of the community for the next 20, 30, 40 years. I can definitely see how there will be a connection between that, those type of I would say corporate citizens and engaging with the local kind of political influencers. But I don't. Yeah, I'm hard pressed to answer that question, with any kind of
Yeah, I mean,
gravitas.
if I can weigh in, I would say it I think you're right. I think for an individual company to address that and sort of move the needle, that's probably only a handful in pretty rare circumstances. But the business sector and the business community is comprised of hundreds of individuals who have significant resources and experience and employ tens of thousands of people. And I think that's the part that the elected officials at all levels will respond to. They want to, we hear jobs is kind of the number one thing when we talk to elected officials trying to support developments, and that's their interest because their constituents are looking for that. I don't know, Justin, to the extent that maybe in your prior experience at the Trade Point Atlantic facility, my guess is you probably had to have a little bit of public infrastructure adjustments to support that. Do you have any, and it's not meant to be a gotcha question. So any insights from your experience there that maybe are applicable here?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't speak for what we're doing here at PES. Again, it's still in its infancy, but I know from past experience with Trade Point, we obviously had miles and miles of infrastructure that was just dilapidated that obviously needed to be brought online to service these buildings. We did successfully secure what was started to be a TIF, ended up being a grant from the local agencies for that infrastructure. And then we also received a Tiger grant for the marine portion of our site that was literally had a bulkhead kind of caving in, if you will. And obviously that's a huge driver for that site is the port, the deep port opportunity. We've brought roll in and roll off there already and things of that nature. So yeah, I think that it's really important. I would say that the onus on a project of that magnitude definitely comes on the developer and the lobbyist, to Brad's point, and just it's kind of a full court press. You just got to get the attention. You got to keep pushing. You got to keep identifying the benefits, which is obviously, thousands of jobs and millions in tax revenue that benefit the community and the region, quite frankly. Yeah,
maybe pitch it as an investment. It's not just
absolutely
spending the money in a good way. There's a return in numerous ways. I don't know if anybody else.
Yeah, I would just add that sort of on the general issue of ensuring that, in particular, our federal elected officials, but state as well, are paying attention to the need for resources for infrastructure as an important regional priority. That is something that we, as a chamber, communicate regularly with our congressional delegation about. We're in fact organizing a gathering in February, now that we, obviously have a sense of who's in seats of leadership, with Senator Carper, who chairs, I'm going to get them mixed up, EPW, and reaching out to Menendez, who's the chair of another committee of jurisdiction, I believe on transit, or it might be the opposite. But so we are actively engaged in those conversations. We're not necessarily going to have the details of at the project level. Obviously, Justin, we're working with your team closely as you all on board to this project. But I think the need for more resources to infrastructure generally, whether that's highways, bridges, roads, transit, is certainly a message we've been trying to communicate on a regular basis to our delegation. That said, if we're missing something, we do always ask our members to reach out to us and provide additional details or the kind of project benefit case points that comes with those kinds of investments. So that's certainly something that we can be a partner with folks on as well.
Great.
Perhaps I could offer a design perspective on it, and that is that how we can actually use design to promote that kind of investment. And so I would think of two immediate opportunities based upon some projects that we've been doing. One, it deals with open space. So the idea of the open space is an infrastructure, right? It's a human infrastructure that we all need to participate in. One of the things about industrial development, we do big buildings. Big buildings need a large amount of rainwater, as an example, control, stormwater control. the ability to design them in such a way that they actually become integrated open spaces. And we've done this in urban environments where and these are industrial sites, just like the Hilco site, are classically on river's edges, right? So the idea that we can redesign these kinds of infrastructures so that they actually become the open space that allows community to re-engage with the riverfront becomes another kind of an opportunity. What that needs is on a more localized basis is working with regulation to be able to establish mechanisms that allow that to work. It's a bit non-traditional, but thinking in that capacity allows for an infrastructure that we need to provide to become a mutual benefit, again, to promote that convergence. The other one that I'll point out is the transportation infrastructure. This is probably where there's been the most revolution recently. Again, the idea that it's not all around the 53-foot trailer anymore, but rather smaller vehicles that are integrated into neighborhoods also create opportunities for other kinds of investment, smaller companies and things like that to begin to serve them. We're designing them into facilities now. They're electrified. The idea that we're going to provide for charging stations, and it's being done and through the investment of potential, and we're doing, by the way, on a speculative basis, because we know it'll attract companies that need that kind of fleet. It also provides for the opportunity in local communities to provide for the businesses that support that fleet. So these are design opportunities that lead to rethinking regulations around specific development objectives, rather than just simply, while we would support them, global regulation. We're dealing with very localized regulation that supports better design initiatives.
That's a good point, Ed. And so getting on 10 years ago, pardon me, when the city updated its zoning code, it created 2 new districts within the industrial classifications for what we called IRMX, industrial residential, and ICMX, industrial commercial, recognizing that the edges in certain locations are blurred, and the monolithic sort of zoning blocks makes sense maybe in certain areas, but there's some edges, those areas of white on your image of convergence that are important. We've got a couple other questions in. I want to jump from one because I want to continue on this concept of convergence and sort of touch base with Leslie, because I think as you were talking, Ed, about convergence and bringing these things together in a large area, we're already doing it, and Leslie and the folks at Ensemble Mosaic are going to really be doing it at the Navy Yard. And I'd say, Leslie, if you want to just maybe address kind of what are the challenges and sort of opportunities that you see when you try to sort of put these uses that maybe have been a little bit separate in the past together.
Well, there's always going to be challenges, but I think the most important part about it is that you have to be very intentional about what you do, and you have to start in your beginning of your planning how you're going to blend these types of or the inclusiveness and the diversity that we are ultimately trying to achieve. With that comes complicated financing that you have to explore, looking for certain subsidies and construction methods. I mean, we as Mosaic have been kind of dealing with those kind of complications as we work in the neighborhood, and we don't see it anything differently here at the Navy Yard. Yes, it's a wonderful backdrop that typically you do not see in the neighborhoods, but if we're really going to try to bring diversity and inclusiveness to the Navy Yard, we're going to be dealing with some of the same financial and economic complexities that we deal with in the neighborhoods. To be able to provide, as we've committed to, a minimum of 15% of affordability of residential units, somewhere between 60% to no greater than 120% AMI. And our goal is really at 80. That always requires some kind of financial assistance to be able to fill the gap, because the construction cost is the same, but if you're trying to bring in rents at a lower and a more affordable and achievable rate, there's always a gap that needs to be filled. So that means that you have to take that extra time and effort to see what programs are available, to see which ones will fit. Some are driven by census tracts, some are driven by timeframes and cycles, and you know, a lot of them are highly political because depending on who's actually in office, you know, do they extend this program or extend that program? So, but if you want to have the convergence that Ed was speaking to, if you want to have that inclusiveness, that's the work that needs to be put in. And I think you mentioned it, Tom, that it does take a lot of effort, and you do have some brain damage as you go through this process, but it's worth it in the end, because at the end product is something that I think all of us can look at and say, this is where the city should be going. We recognize the diversity in the city of Philadelphia. It should not be separate. It should be this convergence. There shouldn't be these separate districts that Ed was talking to. There needs to be that to really build the strength of the city as a whole. So for us, we are highly committed. I think Ensemble is appreciative that Mosaic has the experience in this arena and has had, I think, significant successes in being able to incorporate that kind of diversity and inclusiveness in our projects, so that I think collectively and together that we will be able to achieve what I think, you know, Ed is talking about is convergence.
Great, thank you. And pardon me, another question had come in, sort of kind of picking up on what you were saying about incentives, and just a question maybe for you, Leslie, and for others. Mm-hmm. Do people anticipate any changes in policy considering the next week's start of the Biden administration at the federal level? And if you have something quickly, because there's another question or two we try to get to.
Sure. I mean, I think we're all hopeful. I think we're all hopeful that there will be. We're already seeing there are some great signs of that coming around. Like the new market tax credit program's been extended for 5 years, $5 billion a year. So I think that's a really good example. I think that there's going to be some further advancements in the opportunity zone arena as well. Those things don't specifically help the Navy Yard, but it will help in the neighborhoods, and that can continue to move that needle of convergence that we're talking about. So yeah, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that there will be some upside to that.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that? And if not, I have a couple other questions we can get to. Great. One question came in regarding robotics and automation. And you know, I remember a couple of years ago, the driver and the warehouse worker was on the endangered species list. And I just want to get a sense, maybe from Justin and Brad and what your thoughts are about whether that happened, and what you think the prospects are in the sort of, you know, whatever time frame you want to focus on.
Sure, I'll jump in. In terms of robotics affecting, when we think about robotics and we think about the, I guess, the emergence of the Philadelphia industrial market, I would say the facilities that are, the vast majority of the facilities that will be built in the city and close-in suburbs will be labor intensive, human labor intensive. Though there may be some, you know, robotic, automation in the facilities. The product that is going out and coming in is very much labor intensive. And no matter what, the kind of outbound is always going to need bodies, even if you're able to, you know, bring product in with, you know, without, you know, significant human, you know, labor. The outbound for most of these facilities is definitely labor intensive. I think that's up until today. I would say, number one, the economics of developing in the city. You don't choose to develop a facility in the city when the primary driver is labor. If you're going to make it a box full of kind of automation equipment, for the most part. Will there be some of that? Absolutely, but I think the vast majority of these facilities will definitely be labor intensive. As that paradigm shift changes, when you start talking about big boxes that are well above, you know, 1 million square feet, I think you'll start, those facilities will definitely have more automation in them than the 200,000 square foot facility. But I still think that that developers and not developers, really tenants that are looking to locate in a location like Philadelphia or any urban area where there's, you know, where the primary driver is labor. That just isn't a big part of the equation.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I would agree with Brad. We get that question a lot, and really what we're finding, to Brad's point, is that one of the first questions we're asked is, how's the labor market, right? I mean, there's a reason for that, and over the next, these buildings are meant to last 10, 15, 20 years. So I think that, you know, a lot can happen in that time frame, but for what we're finding is that when we ask the tenants kind of similar questions, that they're always going to rely on labor and employees, and whether there's more robotics or not, it just opens up for other opportunities, whether you're a mechanic or you're having to fix these things, and technology isn't always perfect. So absolutely, I agree with what Brad stated.
And then on the driver, the driver piece, that technology just isn't there yet. as we're seeing, it's just not perfect. I think you have another decade before that technology is perfected from a kind of liability and risk point of view.
And I'll add that I remember the discussion not too long ago. Yes, we're going to have these big dark warehouses where you don't even put lights in them, right? Well, I got to tell you, I've been designing these for quite a few years now. I would tell you that the distribution centers that we're doing right now are heavily automated and heavily occupied. The two go hand in hand and have been. Right now, automation is designed around extending human capability, not replacing it. So we literally, and we've been calling it accompaniment. We literally have projects we've done where robots accompany people to get them to the right place at the right time, or have wrist devices to be able to do that, or allow goods to come to you more easily. And it goes to the nature of the kinds of things that we want. Yeah, these are not bulk things anymore. They're just getting moved one place to another. These are a lot more integrated. So we're doing both heavy automation and a lot of people, their workplaces.
Great. I think we're coming up close to our time here, and I think I certainly have found the conversation to be interesting. I've learned a lot from the panelists. I want to thank the panelists for taking time out of your day to do this, sharing your expertise with the members of Crew Philadelphia. I want to thank Crew Philadelphia for putting this together. Everybody who put this together has another job. They found the time within their day to do that and put this together so that we could advance the region and the city collectively. And I think that should be noted and should be applauded because it's the type of stuff that will allow the information that one of us has, we can disseminate and we can share, and we all can learn from it and we can benefit from it and accelerate activity going forward. The last thing I'd like to say is sort of to the extent that the members of the audience, thank you for taking your time for joining us today, and for your questions and your thoughts. If this has spurred any additional thinking on your part that you care to share, I would encourage you to do that through the Crew Philadelphia social media. We've had 80 plus folks in the audience and plus the panel. If we can share that with others, we can amplify that, and I think that's the real opportunity and benefit from events like this. So on behalf of Crew and the panelists, thank you very much. And I would say stay safe and do the best you can to advance things in the region going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.